to how the brain works. It's actually very fascinating, and it's almost kind of trippy to think about how your own brain works, like your brain thinking about a brain. Kind of cool, actually. So between the ages of 0 and 7, we are observing information or observing life. Let me triple check that I'm recording. We'll just hope that I am. I don't see the thing. Yeah, okay. I don't know what's going on with my Zoom today, guys. Thank you for being there for me. So 0 to 7, you're observing and absorbing everything that's happening around you. You're observing how people interact with each other, the things that they say about themselves, to themselves, any experiences that you have. You're literally just absorbing all of this information. And oh my God, my cat's gonna be so annoying. Lovely. And we're absorbing certain things that are told to us that may or may not be true. So I know for myself, as well as many of the other people that I've worked with, many of my patients, we hear things like this all the time. Money doesn't grow on trees. You have to work hard in order to get good results. Good things come to people who work hard. Fat-free was a huge trend when I was growing up. So I thought only healthy food was fat-free food. Learning that we're either pretty or we're ugly or we're annoying or we're being received well. I always, at this age, I learned like I'm the most annoying thing on the planet. And it sucks that children absorb this type of information because children can be annoying, yes, but that's how they learn, right? Like we don't yet understand our social boundaries. So we're able to pick up on a lot of things. It's bad to sleep in. It's bad to procrastinate on homework. Adults don't need to apologize. That was another really big thing that I learned. What other phrases did you hear when you were a young child? Drop them in the chat. It's really, really fascinating to really think about it in this way of like, what did you absorb at this age? So anything that, where's my chat? I will find it. But anything that you absorbed, whether you feel like it's true or not true, you can drop that in the chat now. I think the money doesn't grow on trees one is a really good one. Parents can't be wrong. Yes. Almost like somebody other than you has the final say at all times and you're not in control. That kind of goes with parents or adults don't need to apologize, or maybe they apologize by just ignoring the fact that they were in a conflict. If you eat, you will get fat. That's another good one. Yeah. Definitely. And then these have little dots to them because we've all absorbed different things. The best thing to do during a conflict is leave the house, yell, scream. There's so many different things that we could have observed that may or may not be serving us in present day. For example, I grew up in a yelling household, and I, without even making the decision to be someone who yelled a lot, noticed that I was yelling a lot when I was in college, whenever I was in conflicts. If I was in conflicts with friends, the first thing that I would do would be start yelling because that's what was modeled for me. So when we are absorbing this type of behavior at this young age, we start then mirroring it in our adult life, whether we're conscious of it or not, because these behaviors are stored as truths in our brain, which is pretty interesting. So between the ages of 7 and 14, that's when we're interpreting everything that we have absorbed earlier on. That's when you are creating meanings for all of the phrases that you've heard, whether they've been true or false. You're making sense of all of it. So while you are interpreting everything, you may be interpreting things accurately or inaccurately. And I like to remind myself that the brain literally develops between the ages of 7 and 14 to be able to interpret the world around us. If you could show a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old a complex adult conflict, do you think they would interpret it correctly or accurately? You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that someone of that age would be able to accurately interpret worldly matters and issues that are as complex as we face as adults. And so that's where we're interpreting all of these things that are far out of our scope of what we should be able to interpret. It's really fascinating to see the brain in this way, that we're not wrong. We haven't been raised wrong. Our brains are not incorrect, and there's nothing wrong with us. It's that our brain is interpreting stuff that is far more mature than what it actually can understand. And since the brain wants to find answers and wants to be right, it might create stories or lessons through these things that you're witnessing that are true or not true. And it will hold on to those things that are incredibly untrue, incredibly inaccurate for dear life in order to feel protected, safe, comfortable. That is the brain's ultimate goal. So between the ages of 14 to 21, that's where you are looking for evidence, or your brain is looking for evidence that all of the things that you have interpreted are the truth. So that's where you are observing the world and seeing maybe a man mistreat a woman, and your brain immediately goes back to like, oh yes, this is why men have power in relationships, women need to be obedient to their boyfriends, or whatever stories you saw when you were a very, very young child. So going back to some of the ones that we saw here, so anytime that you are gaining weight or gaining fat, you'll say, oh, it's because I was eating. Anytime that you see yourself making a mistake or making a decision that doesn't work out for you, the brain will automatically say, oh, it's because my parents were right, right? Is this making sense so far? Cool. So the results of our brain developing in this way leads to the blue versus black or white and gold dress phenomenon. So we all live in these unique realities in the same world. And this is the evidence for this, is that we can look at the same exact thing and see things that are completely different. This is kind of a silly example that I came up with. Another example that I saw just a few years ago was people looking, this actor was holding his daughter in a suggestive way. Perhaps it was a sexual way, perhaps it wasn't. And half of the people that saw this video were like, this is awful. He is definitely a sexual predator. This is so inappropriate. And the other half of the people who saw the video were saying, this is how dads hold their daughters. It's not inappropriate at all. It's just part of life. So we all have this background of information in our subconscious that dictates the way that we see the world and the way that we look at things and categorize them as either okay or not okay. It doesn't really have so much to do with our values as much as it has to do with the way that our brain absorbed information, interpreted that information, and then created or found evidence for that information. This is how the subconscious mind is developed. And I'm sure that there's so many other instances that you can think of this happening. I mean, we've seen thousands in just the past year, right? With all of the political conflict and everything like that. Currently, what's going on in the Middle East is a really good example of ways that we can look at the same exact thing and see something completely different depending on how our brain grew up, how our brain matured into the brain that it is today. Oh, this is formatted a little bit incorrectly, but it's okay. So overall, the brain can create patterns with this information in order to prove itself right. And this is how the brain lives on a day-to-day basis. It relies on these patterns because assessing every single thing that you come across in your life as a brand new thing is too much energy for the brain. And our bodies innately love laziness because it costs less energy. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It's part of human nature. So some of the patterns that you might see in your life based on how our brains developed are, for example, not being able to finish things that you start, having a lot of ideas, starting a lot of projects. Maybe it's an art project. Maybe you start remodeling the bathroom. Maybe you're starting to create a course for your online coaching business and you never end up finishing it. The bathroom stays unfinished. The art project is still halfway through, even months or years later. Maybe you start decluttering a closet and you don't end up finishing it, or starting a project that's going to take the course of 2 or 3 weeks and you never actually complete the task. Another way that our brain creates and falls into patterns is always falling off track. Maybe you start drinking celery juice every single morning, or you decide that you're going to do that. And within a few days, you are no longer drinking celery juice and you have no idea why you fell off track. Or you say that you're going to go to the gym every single day, or stop eating junk food, or stop stress eating or emotional eating, or whatever it might be, and not being able to stay on track with this goal, and noticing that you fall off track no matter pattern for your behavior. Another example of a pattern is being addicted to negative self-talk. If you've ever tried to stop negative self-talk, you know that you are in a serious addiction, right? Because even though